Hi, everyone, and welcome to VaynerX Presents Gen Z for the Now. I'm Andrea Sullivan, the CMO of VaynerX, and we took a bit of a pause to support our Black and Brown communities over the past couple weeks. But we're back, and we thank you for joining us. This week, we'll be focusing on all things Gen Z. We'll have VaynerX Chairman and CEO Gary Vaynerchuk and VaynerMedia's Chief Strategy Officer co-hosting the conversations today with an amazing lineup of speakers. We've got Gen Z influencers, brand and business leaders, activists, nonprofit CEOs, and entrepreneurs. Just a couple quick reminders. You can find all of the recordings of Marketing for the Now on VaynerX.com, and we'll be posting them on social as soon as they're ready, so stay tuned. And please help us in keeping the conversation going on Twitter, hashtag Marketing for the Now, and feel free to write us with any kinds of remarks or questions on marketingforthenow@VaynerX.com. So first up, we've got our beloved Wanda Pogue, VaynerMedia's very own Chief Strategy Officer, who joined us just last year. She was with Saatchi & Saatchi for almost 19 years. Gary will be leading a conversation with Wanda about some Gen Z research that we just recently fielded. Over to you guys.
Thanks for that, Andrea. Wanda, it is super fun to have you with us today. This is the first time we're doing a VaynerX team member on this show. So first of all, to everybody, I've also been super head down working on all sorts of things in many different arenas, personal and obviously with the organization and COVID and Black Lives Matter and all those things of that nature. And so I miss a lot of you. I will be back with tea with Gary V next week. I'm making that announcement on here on Marketing for Now. I know a lot of you have been asking. We have an incredible lineup, and let's start with Wanda. So Wanda, as Chief Strategy Officer, obviously the first kind of 6 months, 8 months that we've been jamming together, you've been very focused on the internal team and getting the organization going. But one of the things we talked a lot about when I was courting you to join the team was doing our own studies on things that we were passionate about. And I'm really excited that Gen Z is the first one. I think it is the most exciting generation for me personally in a lot of ways. So say hello, and why don't you give us a little bit of a context for the work you and the team have done over the last several months.
Absolutely. Hey, Gary. Look at us.
Yeah, we're here.
Super excited to be here. Thank you for having me and for giving me this opportunity to share the stage with you and to host with you. This is a topic, and like you said, we actually talked very early on when we first met about the possibility of really kind of fueling our knowledge and our passion for culture by really going deep and doing studies across numerous, different cohorts. Gen Z is something I'm incredibly passionate about. I share your excitement with it. I think that this is such an incredible generation, incredibly powerful, incredibly inspiring, incredibly moving. So I'm glad that this is where we started. We just fielded a quant study on mobile, which also had the ability to be able to get some really rich, video selfies to some really provocative questions. So I'm excited to share. We did it through the lens of COVID, but also through the lens of everything that's happening that's impacting Gen Z as well. So I'm excited to kind of get into some of those details with you and the audience.
So I know a lot of non-marketers are watching, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people in my community, a lot of different communities, nonprofit, things of that nature. So let's go into some rapid fire. Like, let's quantify who is Gen Z, and what's their range, and why should we care?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of the lowdown. So Gen Z are young adults and kids who are currently between the ages of 8 to 23. So that means that they were born anywhere from 1997 to 2012. Okay. They are, to kind of put that in context, these are kids and young adults who are entering middle school, high school, college, or the workforce for the very first time. And I think one of the most important things for marketers to kind of keep in mind is that they're 91 million strong, and they represent about 25% of the total US population. They have a spending power that is profound, about 150 billion in spending power. But the most interesting thing about them that I think we'll get into as we kind of go into the details of the study is that their influence on their household is even more powerful. So that's one of the things that we found that we'll be talking about a little bit more.
What's the contrast to the millennials? Obviously, that's been the word that's come out of everybody's mouth for so long now. And so watching Gen Z starting to get attention, I'm curious to watch everybody quantify this gen versus millennials. Obviously, you know, when we bucket people into groups, there's always, you know, stereotypes that don't react in different way. For example, I don't feel very, am I Generation X? I'm trying to figure out that, but you know, I feel
You're Gen X.
But nonetheless, how do they contrast?
You're a Gen Zer at heart.
How do they contrast with millennials, just for the marketers that are on right now?
Yeah, and you're right in terms of many marketers kind of lump them together. I think I'll kind of start with some of the demographics. So, you know, they are one of the most racially and ethnically diverse groups, even more so than millennials. So, you know, when millennials was the hot topic, everyone talked about how diverse they were. Gen Z is even more diverse. So 52% are white, 14% are Black, 25% Hispanic, 6% Asian, and also very diverse in their mindset and the way that they think. I think some of the other things that I think it's important for marketers to kind of keep in mind when they look at, you know, how Gen Z compares is, you know, while millennials were or are digital natives, Gen Z is truly social media native. You know, so that's one of the things that I think is really critical. They adopt platforms really early. They are engaged in a lot of different platforms, and digital is not just their world. Social media is their world and their feed. The other thing that's really important to kind of keep in mind, and there's adjectives that get kind of assigned, you know, to every generation. And millennials were often talked about as being the optimistic, idealistic generation. The words that come up most often with Gen Z is they're incredibly pragmatic and real. And those are things that, you know, you see in their work ethic, you see in the way that they approach things, and you see it in how grounded they are, you know, in terms of being able to kind of take reality, but also remain optimistic within that reality. And then if there's one thing that I would focus on that kind of helps, you know, explain who they are and their attitudes are their formative years, you know, so this is a generation that was really born into the recession of, you know, they were either born or formed and grew up in the Great Recession of 2009. You know, they have been schooled under the constant threat of mass shootings and lockdown drills. And that has shaped their school and their schooling experience. You know, they're also witnessing and have witnessed some of the greatest societal and political turmoil. And all of that kind of makes them who they are. And if that wasn't enough, you know, they are living through one of the first global pandemics. So all of those things kind of shape not only who
Welcome to the world, kids.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. And so what stood out the most, you know, so that's the framework, you know, before we let you run here, and obviously you'll be interjecting throughout this, what kind of stood out in, you know, what are the headlines, you know, not from the macro that you just set up, but what are some of the individual things? Because I do think there's a ton of entrepreneurs and marketers on here who are going to try to figure out how to connect, you know, hopefully if they're in this group of people watching right now, they're under some sort of ethos of like, let's bring value, let's not just sell or manipulate to this generation, plus the pragmatic nature and the inability to trick, you know, in a world where there's so much more information, you know, what's the right angle? You know, I called it jab, 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 right hook when I wrote my book years ago, give, and then ask. You know, and I think a lot of people try to manipulate, and take, you know, so trying to form entrepreneurs and businesses here in a way that might bring value to them as well. What are some of the insights that they can take away from this, you know, free conference and maybe build on and experiment with their content to see if they can start to resonate?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm going to share like 5 different findings that we found, but the one thing that I would point out, that was surprising, but also incredibly inspiring about this generation is that it's not all gloomy. I know that I just like listed a whole litany of what their realities have been like and what has kind of formed them. But when you talk to them, when you look at the responses, I think what gives you a great amount of hope and respect for this generation is their resilience, their determination, their pragmatism, and their ingenuity, their ability to create, to kind of pivot, when life throws some real hardballs at them. We did this survey during a really critical time when there was a lot going on in their lives, and they're still hopeful and optimistic about the change that can actually come about. And I think that that's where brands can kind of help them play a role, helping them realize the ambitions that they have and helping them really champion the things that they are incredibly passionate about.
I love that. What surprised you, Wanda? Anything stand out?
Yeah, it's really hard when you kind of conduct a survey. You've talked to 1,000 people, you have all of this data, but there were 5 things that really kind of stood out for me and for my team. And I want to give a real big shout out to my team who were so instrumental in fielding this study and just kind of helping, pull out the really rich nuggets. I think the first one, and it kind of goes to that point of optimism, is if I had to define this generation in any way, is that they dream with their eyes wide open, and it's really kind of who they are, so of course, they have dreams and ambitions and hopes for the future, but they're also tempered realists. And, they kind of approach their dreams first and foremost, looking for stability and safety, both financial and emotional. And a lot of that has to do with everything that I just mentioned in terms of what they were born into. But when they look to the future, as optimistic as they are grounded. So, some of the things that we found is that they're two times, more likely to be hopeful about the future. And they really believe that, despite the fact that COVID, and we did this through the lens of COVID, is bringing about some uncertainty, they are taking actions to ensure that the future that lies ahead for them is something that can be positive for them. So this is a generation that, and some of this makes me a little bit sad. Instead of pursuing, English as a major, which they may absolutely love, they're kind of doing things that are a lot more practical, where they can ensure that they'll be able to land a really good job. When they
was there anything? Did it get into anything on their point of view of college?
Yeah, I think this is going to be the generation that's most educated. They believe in the value of education, but they believe in the value of education not in a romantic sense, in the very practical sense. There is a realization that in order to be able to compete in the job market, you may need to have that college degree, but they don't stop there. They are quite intuitive in knowing that they need to bring very practical skills, and apply that practicality. They're doers. They know that they need to be the ones that are filming, that are editing, that are creating the content, that are ideating. That's just kind of who they are. So it's a combination.
Do they have a point of view on millennials, or did it not go into that?
No, didn't go into that.
Any hot takes? Random guesses? All right. What else before we move on to our next incredible guest, which I've been kind of very excited about. So I want to make sure you get in. Go ahead.
They're mobilized for change, so we often talk about how socially driven they are. And one of the things that we found is that 81% are planning to show up at the next election. And this number was actually higher among Blacks than their white counterparts or USH counterparts. They know that in order to be able to impact change, they need to be able to cast their vote. So that was another big thing that we found. In order, they're vocal, they're activists, but they know that they also have a responsibility come November. I think one of the other things that's really surprising, and this is something that I think marketers need to kind of bear in mind, is that they also see the good in big. So very much, you know, kind of in line with their pragmatic nature. You know, when we ask them what are the brands that they love, I think some people might be surprised that some of the brands that they called out are brands like Amazon, Google, you know, the Walmarts of the world. And that's very different than millennials who had kind of, you know, this disdain for big corporations and big institutions. And I think the reason why Gen Z really feels passionate about like some of these brands is that not only do they appreciate them for their convenience and accessibility and their ability to be able to kind of, they see the utility in them, but I think importantly, they also know that in order for pendulums to swing and change to really happen, they are quite cognizant that it needs to happen at a level, at a corporate level. You know, many times that's where change can impact, and they see that. You know, so they don't demonize large corporations. They actually see them as a part of the change that they want to see take place.
I love that.
Yeah, you know,
I love that. I love that from the optimistic nature of it. I think optimism tends to out-operate cynicism. And I like it because it's going to hold corporations accountable, because that's going to be the consumer and that's going to be leverage over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last two findings, you know, and one that we're really leaning into at Vayner is this notion of parenting the parents. You know, so Gen Zers are, you know, they're the new family influencers. And that's why, you know, when you talk about their spending power, you almost need to look at it more broadly, you know, because they are truly impacting not only the behaviors within the home, the adoption of new social platforms within the homes, but also the brands that come into the homes. You know, so, and even the societal view. So we had, and I'll just read you this one quote from a young female that we interviewed. She said, "I offered my dad advice on some racist things that he had been taught as a child, and I'm trying to help educate him on why it's wrong." So it's on all levels that Gen Z is kind of impacting and influencing the household.
Love that. Love that. Anything else, Wanda, before we move on to our next guest?
The last one was about twisting traditions. So
okay.
If anything has come out of COVID is that a lot of their monumental milestones have kind of been put on delayed or canceled. And another way that brands can kind of play a role is, you know, to kind of invite them in and allow them to kind of realize some of these milestones, either virtually, which Gen Z is actually, you know, trying to do themselves, or in a forum that kind of allows them to experience the things that they're missing out on. So those were like some of the bigger findings, but you know, it was great to do. And just, I walked away from this with even greater respect, you know, for this generation. I think that we can all learn a thing or two from them.
I love it. I appreciate the hard work by you and the team. Looking forward to turning a lot of those thoughts into practicality. Andre, why don't we get on to our next guest? One, I'm going to ask you to interject as we speak with Haley in a second and see if you hear anything.
I'll actually introduce the next guest for you.
Oh, even better. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so used to Andre. Andre, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. We're going to give Andre
listen, I'm breaking patterns. Speaking of breaking patterns, hashtag marketing for the now. I see a lot of you on Twitter. I'm kind of reading along in real time and want to incorporate people's thoughts, questions, things of that nature. So please give us our thoughts on our unbelievable Wanda here with hashtag marketing for now. And definitely, I think you're going to get a lot of great quotes and excitement from our next guest, which will set up Wanda to introduce her.
Yes. So I'm very, very excited to introduce Haley Thomas. So Haley is CEO and founder of the Happy Organization, which is a youth-founded and led organization by Gen Z for Gen Z that aims to achieve youth empowerment through holistic education, unlocking, activating, fueling the inherent superpowers of this generation. Haley founded the organization in 2013 to address the need for more affordable nutrition and culinary education in at-risk communities. And I will tell you, she started her activism at the age of 10. At 19, she's engaged over 100,000 people. My daughter is a fan and a huge admirer. And in her words, Haley is a badass. So, welcome, Haley. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here and just grateful for this space being created to really dive into all that is Gen Z.
Haley, thank you so much for being on. It's a real pleasure. I hope you're doing well. Before we go into this, please give your Twitter handle, because I want everybody following you and, more importantly, engaging in any chance that they have on social.
Yes, my Twitter handle is at Haley V Thomas, Haley without the Y, so Haile V like Victor Thomas.
Funny, I use V like Victor too when I have to pronounce it. So Haley, why happy org? What was the fine? Obviously when you start activism at 10, it's in your blood, it's in your DNA, it's in your environment. But what's the tipping point that starts the happy org? And for everybody watching, how do you describe it in your own words?
Yes, absolutely. So for Happy, it really started after my family was able to reverse my dad's type 2 diabetes without the use of medication, but changing our lifestyle and eating healthier. And so this happened when I was around like 8 or 9 years old. And the really revolutionary thing that happened within our family was that when my dad was diagnosed, my parents didn't choose to shelter me and my little sister from what was going on and, to try to make it seem like nothing was wrong, but instead included me and my sister in learning about the condition and about ways that we could potentially heal him without the use of medication. And so in many ways, I have been raised as I like to call it like a productive conspiracy theorist in terms of really researching and looking into all possibilities. And so through this journey of learning about health and wellness and changing our habits and eventually seeing the power of food heal my dad, I was, in school looking around like, where is this education? I've learned so much about how valuable it is to nourish and fuel my body and my potential through food. But my peers have no idea. And so at first my activism was a little rusty. I was definitely doing a lot of shaming and like, if you eat this pizza, you're going to clog your arteries type of thing. And then I started to realize that approach was not effective. And it was more so approaches through the heart and through vulnerability and relation that was really going to create the change that I wanted to see. And so that's when I started sharing this story and eventually forming Happy, because that resource of fun and engaging nutrition education just wasn't available, especially from a peer-to-peer perspective. So that's kind of a little story behind it.
What's your relationship with creativity? Obviously when you think about fun and engaging creative to get people there, or communication, A, what's your relationship with it? And B, to bring value to everybody who's watching around Gen Z, what's your observation being so deep in it on this generation's process with creativity?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of creativity, that has played a huge role in my life. And I think kind of tunnel visioning back on vulnerability, I think creativity requires that thing. And Gen Z really steps into honesty and truth and sharing that and digesting that internally and externally. And so for us, I think creativity is like the foundation of our expression. And it's a way for us to innovate and think of and reimagine kind of the world that we want to see and want to live within. And so right now, I've been just so proud of myself and others who are really showing up in these authentic and genuine ways that are honestly entry points for so many different people. And I think that's what's really brilliant about creativity, is that it allows for anyone to get value out of that without there being kind of this one focus or one perspective, but really so many different angles that people can relate to and find themselves within and learn through. And so for us, I think creativity is such a big piece, and it's something that we haven't let society stifle. I mean, so much of our education system has tried to, squeeze creativity out of our daily engagement and things like that, but we're finding ways
to. Do you feel that Gen Zers recognize that the machine of the way education is structured, back to Wanda's point earlier, it's a generation that values education, but the way it's being executed and the way it's being sold I've been very interested and engaged in tens of thousands of conversations with Gen Zers around the lack of practicality of taking on debt and the fact that for entrepreneurship or creativity, the structure of K through 12 seems to be missing the mark. Did you feel that? Was that common talk?
Oh, absolutely. I always have conversations with my friends about just the fact that we've been able to observe the ways that society has, failed generations before us. And I think that we are also utilizing this opportunity of alternative education to be far more informed and engaged than ever before. So for me personally, I decided not to go to college because of the debt aspect, but also the fact that I can learn so much in the field that I'm interested in through alternative education forms. And so for us, I think we're just redefining what success looks like, the avenues for education, and the ways that we can also learn from and teach each other and other generations. What's been beautiful to see, and Wanda kind of touched on this earlier, is that this structure of teacher and student is completely deconstructed at this point. We're seeing this intergenerational learning and collaboration, and I think that is a really beautiful thing to see.
Haley, talk to me about, it's funny, you're talking, I made the joke earlier that I feel so Gen Z, and really the reality is my biggest connection point with the generation is fire. Like I have a whole lot of it. You have a whole lot of it. Like, do you see that? And what's the blend of, like, it's, Wanda articulated it in a pragmatic way, but I think we'd be remiss, back to all the things that this generation grew up in, back to Wanda's point, school shootings, many things, recessions, many things that the half generation right before that didn't have to deal with. I think the fire comes, in my opinion, from a mix of that optimism and practicality, but I do think there's a lot of angst in the system. There is a lot of, it's also a generation that grew up with social media in a way that 95% of them care about how many followers and likes, and you start getting into, a scaled version of popularity from high school. And I do sense in all these incredible traits, I do sense a little bit of angst leading to some of the fire. When you hear that word fire, do you agree with me? How do you interpret that? What are you seeing?
I definitely agree and resonate with that. And I think that a lot of it is rooted in the fact that we've been able to identify our power and position in society far earlier than generations before us. And I think that's really key. I know personally, growing up, my parents always validated my voice and provided, a platform for me to explore different topics and to explore the many facets of being human. And so I think that has also been replicated in many households. And for us, we've been able to also find our voice through online platforms and through connecting with each other and people from all over the world in ways that we've never been able to do before. So I think that in a way, being empowered by each other is what's fueling this fire, and being able to have a general scope and general awareness of the realities of our world is something that is allowing us to really step fully into our power and position in society. I think that the lack of illusions helps us understand how we can authentically step into this space and to shake things up. And I love that we're just demanding that rather than asking for it at this point. And it's beautiful to see us, utilizing classic forms of civic engagement, but also realizing that there's so much more power in the ways that we just push forward as people. And I think that
do you think social media's importance now at the top of the pedestal of communication with this generation's deep understanding of it is, that's social / this internet at this time, is that, besides parents' affirmation, that tool has given this generation the confidence, audacity, and just capability to play that role?
Absolutely. Being able to validate each other and our experiences outside of our households has been something that I believe, allows us to create this currency that is so transformational. We're able to really be able to see each other and hear each other and move forward in a way that we're able to build something that truly aligns with us and who we are and the vision that we want to see. And so I think that it's great to have spaces where we don't have to explain ourselves too much, and we can really come together over this common experience and the things that we are passionate about.
Wanda, would love to get you to jump in here. Anything that you've observed that matches the study? Any question you might have for Haley? Any thoughts, observations for this incredibly awesome young woman?
Incredible, Haley. One of the things that you mentioned, you talked about your parents, and one of the things that we saw in the study is that when you ask Gen Z who they most admire, most of them actually mention their parents, and that's also a shift from previous generations that would do sports heroes or, you know, celebrities. What is it about your parents that you find most inspiring, and why do you think so many Gen Zers are gravitating to their parents as role models today?
I personally also find my parents to be my biggest inspirations and role models. And I think, again, this is rooted in the transparency. We've been able to see them fight through and work through so much and have been a part of those journeys and transitional phases within the household. So I think in many ways, there's just a deeper rooted connection to the people in our actual lives, and seeing, you know, individuals grow and growing as a collective. I think that's what really creates inspiration, is like being able to relate to the experiences. And, you know, I've been so happy to see this shift of power in terms of who is deemed as, you know, an influencer and who is deemed as having a voice worthy of listening to. I think that we're recognizing that there is so much power in just authentic experiences and holding space for those things and digesting them, and really just getting to engage with people that we can relate to. I think that for us is creating a path for change. And so when we're looking at our parents and we're seeing what we're going through, I think that it allows us to almost feel safe in exploring our humanity. And I know for a fact, like, that has been my experience with my parents, is just seeing them be human and not shield everything from me. And this rawness, I think, is what is allowing us to shape a world that's far more genuine as well.
Haley, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for being on this with us. And if there's anything I can ever do for you going forward, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. And so amazing to just be acknowledged in this space, our generation, and to have our voices be heard.
Awesome. Wanda, want to say goodbye and introduce our next guest?
All right. Thank you so much, Haley. A pleasure. Well, our next guest is the wonderful Tracy Ann Lim, who is the Chief Media Officer for JP Morgan Chase. She recently took on this new role, new and very important role. Tracy Ann joined JP Morgan Chase after the agency side, which of course we love, having built her resume at companies including MediaVest, Initiative, Cara, and the Media Assembly. An internal memo regarding Tracy praised her for her amazing ability to deliver excellence across the company's entire performance marketing landscape. No small task, especially at a big institution. Welcome, Tracy. It is a pleasure to have you on Marketing for the Now.
Hi, thank you. That was an amazing intro. Are you available for all meetings, Wanda?
I am. Talk to Gary.
Yeah, Tracy, I text your family. They put that together for you. So, you know, Tracy, this is really fun for me. You know, through this series, we do have a mix of people that we actively work with. We get to actively work together with Chase and Vayner. You know, I've said this to you privately behind your back, and so I feel very comfortable saying this on a large audience. You're one of the most knowledgeable practitioners of your craft that we get to work with. And I appreciate that, because that's a big deal for us, because we are a little bit more progressive. And if somebody doesn't know what you're talking about, you tend to not be able to achieve that with a client. So it's just been a pleasure working with you, and I'm really glad you're here. And obviously some of the things that you and Chase have been doing resonates quite a bit here in today's day. So Tracy, when you hear Gen Z, just for fun, before we get into it, how do you play with word association on that? Who in your life is in that demo? If not, how have you observed it? Obviously, being this chapter of your career in a bank, maybe some of the insights that Wanda talked about as how they're influencing parents might be interesting, but obviously you're thinking a bit later down the pike. But the high end of Gen Z becomes very important because you want to get them into the just in general. You as a person, you as an executive, Gen Z, little 411. What do you got?
Gen Z, go. Well, I think Haley is the best representation I've come across. It was a pleasure listening to her speak. What I will tell you is that I think the danger lies in falling into cliches and bucketing people against the truisms that you think are true of everyone. So I think everybody needs to check themselves often when they read a brief, create a brief, or talking to one another and trying to create something. That avoiding cliches is really, really, really important. Talk to any millennial, of which I am supposedly one, depending on which definition you go by. Cliches can really be dangerous. I think when I think about Gen Z, I think about their ability to change the world. I think about their fearlessness. I worry for them, obviously, in the moment many of them find themselves coming out into the world from schools and universities and such. So as a person, I think that they are a tremendous force. And as an executive at JP Morgan Chase, I think we have a responsibility at the crosshairs of hopefulness and anxiousness, which we know that they're feeling. Your research shows that, our research shows that. And it's an opportunity to step up and give them more of what they need.
Talk to me about let's take a step out from one thing that Gen Z really has that I've noticed has been something you've been leaning into, and I've been dying to ask you this, but I'm too busy, so we don't get enough meetings together. I think Gen Z in general is quite agile. They think this, and they're right, because I think it is like the remote control to society, and you can move so fast.
Yeah.
What's your point of view on agility? I watched you super agile during COVID as an executive, thus driving the organization to be more agile than I've been accustomed to seeing it. Points of view on agility and maybe even how it plays into Gen Z?
Okay, so agile for me in this moment has gone from being a word that we all throw around, that you see on a page. We try to design processes behind, to try to force the issue. But there's nothing quite like a pandemic to really make it happen. And so what we've seen is agility taking on lots of new and interesting forms. It's become the DNA of how the media team works at Chase, and in fact, the entire marketing community. And it's meant that we can, as it relates to connecting agility to Gen Z is really easy. We're not doing anything that would make them stand up and say, wow, you're doing something really surprising. Instead, I feel like agility for us is helping us meet them where they are. It's enabling us to be faster. It's enabling us to show up in more authentic and timely ways, which makes us more purposeful. But beyond that, I think it's put a stop to the idea that the media people should get on with their stuff, the creative people get on with their stuff, the site people get on with their stuff, and eventually we'll come together and somehow it will work and we'll be able to iterate. I think Gen Z and the current environment are both unapologetically unaccepting of that. And so the meaning of agility for us has upended many of the processes that we're used to running. I'll tell you, my favorite meeting that I see come through at the moment is the one that starts with the word Scrum.
And explain that for everybody who doesn't know what that means.
It means a whole bunch of people who would usually email one another over the course of a few weeks, get on a call and make it happen. One of my other favorite things at the moment is the meeting happens whether most people can attend or not. So if you have most of who you need, get on with it, And so
right,
it's kind of breaking bad habits.
Right, which is, just for the entrepreneurial set and the SMB set that's watching this, corporate land is incredible at being slow. So if two people are missing a meeting, it gets rescheduled and literally needs to get done right away.
Correct.
yourself being 8 weeks later?
Yeah, I mean, doing the right thing in terms of wanting to build consensus across big groups takes time. And I think this moment that we're in now has shifted the lens, meaning we choose speed. And so how do we get that? How do we accomplish that? And how do we make sure we're catching up all of the stakeholders that we need to, rather than waiting for them to attend? Does that make sense?
It does, which, you know, it's all I've ever known. So it only makes sense. Corporate didn't make sense to me. And so I'm happy that it's starting to head in that direction. And speaking of speed and agility, to that point, I think the best example that we worked together on was Show Me Your Walk. Talk to me about that. Explain to everybody what that was, and talk to me about the learnings, the organization, because there's a big group of individuals here with humongous size companies. And so I think we're trying to have a good mix of individuals. So I'm so glad you're here. What was the learnings there, and what was that all about as context for everyone?
So Show Me Your Walk was all about tackling a moment for this Gen Z group, whom were, you know, the opportunity to walk the stage coming out of college, coming out of university, was kind of taken away by the coronavirus and lockdown and quarantine. So unable to have that moment and reach that milestone in the ways in which they had expected and that generations past had the opportunity to. So it just felt obviously very sad, and an opportunity for us to lean into years and years and years of work and product development around the student cohort, right? So it's a group we've always cared about. And so this newfound agility and this newfound cross-functional units that we developed meant that we could see the opportunity and deliver and really show up. And what we learned, Gary, is that even by just focusing on what is seemingly a small cohort, given that we're the bank for everyone, right? And we're used to talking at scale to lots and lots of audiences, but just focusing our energies there didn't mean that it was something small. For us, the teaching was pointing your energies in one area has the ability to light up the octagon in a really meaningful way. In other words, people in branch, employees, on the investment side, on the consumer bank side, across the firm, everybody felt the power of that campaign and what it meant. And so really, we're really, really proud of it. I'm really, really proud of it. I know that your team were involved in it, and I know that they're very proud of it. So not only was it the right thing to do, but it has given us a springboard to rethink and refocus. How do we ensure that we can continue to show up? How do we ensure that we are delivering full palettes of ideas for this group, right? And instead of waiting for perfection, how do we iterate? How do we do more?
Do you feel that there was learnings on the big corporation side that perfection actually has a chance of making it less successful? Do you feel like because it went faster that the corporate side may have seen imperfections, but that's what Gen Z was, you know, raving and enjoying the most?
Well, I think there's a lot of patience and tolerance in this COVID moment for imperfection. And so perhaps we were able to get away with it because of that. What I will say to you, more than an imperfection idea, it was more about showing up in the right places and being comfortable with entering what we would have considered potentially uncomfortable territories, right? So we were imaginative, and that's something to be proud of when you're a big firm like ours, and it's not something you always get to do. And so case in point, I think we showed up in an unexpected way, but it was the right place to turn up in TikTok as part of Show Me Your Walk, right? And I say unexpected because I just don't think anybody would have expected Chase to arrive there via Kevin Hart and his 2 dogs, right?
Yes.
So the lesson there being just purely from a media perspective, what's the right mix? How do we break our old campaign rules, right? So there's a rigidity to, frequency management and impression levels that you need in order to succeed. There's a lot of science that goes into delivering great campaigns. And I think what Gen Z is teaching us and what Show Me Your Walk taught us is that sometimes you have to throw the rule book out and get comfortable with new mechanisms. Like, for example, is a frequency of 180 right or wrong? Maybe it's right for a younger group who spend just a few seconds with you here and there, right? So, and that's being dramatic, and don't anybody quote me on the 180. I'm not going to go buy campaigns with a frequency of 180. That's just a throwaway number.
On the record, I'm super interested in frequencies of 180. I want 5 billion impressions into people's minds over and over and over. Because what you're talking about though is the old guard thinking everyone's consuming that 30-second commercial. That just wasn't happening. And why 180 is a very valid debate is 2 and 1 and 3 seconds at a time. You do that math, it's still just a tiny piece of someone's, entire month or 3 months. So, I understand where you're coming from on like, don't quote me on that. I have a funny feeling, how I like to clip the videos from 12 years ago and make a new video of it. I have a funny feeling there'll be more clipping on this moment. We have a tight schedule here, Tracy, and I can listen to you speak all day. I'm going to let Wanda come in here real quick and see if there's anything she wanted to double click on from the report or anything that she just wanted to say. Wanda?
Hey, Tracy Ann. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for showing me your walk as the parent of, a 2020 graduate, whose graduation was hopefully postponed, but, very likely to still be canceled. You're right about lighting the octagon, like as a parent, I felt it and it really spoke to me. And, my teams were proud to work on it, but I was really proud to be on the receiving end of it. And I thought it was so impacting. I think my last question would be, any kind of, advice that you would give brands for how to help preserve the optimism that we see in Gen Z, given the financial realities and landscape that they're walking into.
I mean, as a mom myself, I think we bear a responsibility to have a continuity of conversation. I think that's the most important thing, right? Is to continue to talk about these things over and over. From my professional standpoint, I will tell you that we're looking at it from a conversational standpoint as well. We have this thing we call Chase Chats that we're really, really proud of. And it's anchored in the idea that we can provide safe spaces to have those tough conversations around what is such a personal topic. And in this moment when you have the synchronization of a very personal topic and a very challenging time, and so many other things that are making us anxious, we have a responsibility to find new and interesting ways to take all of our knowledge and intelligence and tools and ways to empower people to be more thoughtful and careful about their financial well-being in this moment. And I think for me, the word is conversation, and trying to emulate conversation in the media space, right? So as to maintain this idea that we can meet people where they are.
Love it. Well, Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
See you soon.
Let's move on.
Thank you. So we'll move into our next guest. Our next guest is Heron Preston, an established streetwear designer, a youth culture shaper, an artist, a content creator, an author, a DJ, and so much more. He has collaborated with the likes of Kanye West and Virgil Abloh, and has his namesake label debuted in Paris Fashion Week. I believe it was in 2019. Has a great passion for innovation and creativity, which obviously speaks, to the values of Gen Z and driving sustainability through innovation. So welcome, Preston. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting to be a part of this.
Aaron, it's I was always curious over the last several years what would be the serendipity of, there's so many people I admire and have love for, and sometimes I have the opportunity to occasionally DM and just show love, and other times I can't wait to like stumble on that person at some event and just roll up and dap it out. So I didn't see COVID and on a Zoom stream, but it's really exciting for me to chop up as well, and I hope you and well.
I remember stumbling on your YouTubes a while ago, and so now we're here. No, it's really cool to be in touch with you as well.
I appreciate it. So listen, that intro speaks truth, and this is why I so resonate with so many that are coming up the game, because for me, for example, earlier mentions, my parents were always my heroes. And since I was, Gen X and went through millennial, everybody made fun of me. And now that seems to be emerging with Gen Z. And then I was always very Renaissance, just super chaotic and didn't believe in focus on one thing. Believed in focusing on one thing when I thought I had, blood in the water, and I'd go hard at it, but then widening because I needed that creative approach. You're so creative. You have so much going on with innovation and experimentation. Actually, first, let's start with your Twitter handle, because I have a funny feeling a ton of people are going to want to follow you. Speaking of everybody on Twitter, I'm watching all of you. Some of you are being very smart. You see that I'm retweeting like a storm, and a bunch of you are getting a ton of followers. So big daps to the hackers out there. But give your Twitter handle and please answer that experimental innovation question.
So my Twitter it's just my name, Aaron Preston. It's not as active as my Instagrams are, so follow me.
No worries. We're not going to shame you.
And then I have a personal Instagram. It's just Heron, @Heron, my first name.
Love it.
So yeah, follow those 3 accounts, and that's where you can just find everything about me.
Love it.
And so to answer the question, my approach to experimentation, creativity, I kind of, think about this moment when I was, playing with a design, and I showed a friend, and we were just getting into this idea of like giving people what they were never supposed to have. And I think that was when I realized that is what I was up to, and that's what I was really passionate about, and that's what brought me joy. And there was this kind of playfulness that went along in this process, this framework of dreaming up what were we never supposed to have, and then designing into that. But also I really love, quotes like, I listen to Miles Davis, I love jazz music, and one of my favorite Miles Davis quotes is, play what's not being played, play what's not there. I think that is always kind of how I love to approach my design process, is introducing this is again a kind of tying into introducing new stories. And I love to tell new stories and introduce, kind of continuous like newness into the storytelling of the fabric of our culture. But then also looking at like new technologies and how they drive.
I'm sorry to interrupt you because you're flowing, but you inspired me to ask a very exciting question for me that I think will help the majority of people watching. What do you think's in you? What circumstance lends itself to the lack of fear that what you just said requires?
I think, it might come from me being a skater, my background, just like
seriously
growing up and just like, having this attitude, this kind of like punk attitude, this kind of like against corporations and, against rules, breaking rules and rewriting rules and writing new rules to follow. And I think that's kind of where it comes from. It might just come from like my youth and just like listening to like music and just wanting to be a part of kind of writing history instead of, participating so much in it. Like, how can I make my mark at what I think is really interesting to me and what I want people to really see or experience that really isn't there yet. It's kind of taking these dreams or these ideas, out of my head and presenting it in packaged ways that are kind of culturally relevant and relatable and, revolutionary.
I love that. What's your hot take on Gen Z? Like if a company rolled up on you that you were JVing on or doing something big, or even how you think about selling your stuff, like what's your observation? Drop some knowledge on that.
My observation is that, and I get a lot of feedback. I think feedback is one of the best things, especially with social media, when I put something out there and I get the feedback. So one of the posts I recently posted was about a t-shirt that I edited. It was a Supreme t-shirt, and that Supreme t-shirt said, "Fuck the world," excuse my French. And I went.
You have found the right place to drop the fuck word. So go ahead.
So the t-shirt said "fuck the world," and I edited the t-shirt maybe like 2 months ago when we were just hitting like, this pandemic, and I was like, man, I want to edit that to say "unfuck the world," and so I basically embroidered a UN in front of fuck, and I Instagrammed a photo of that t-shirt, and I basically said, whoever can tell me what you're doing to unfuck the world, I'll gift you this t-shirt. This post performed the best out of any post I'd ever posted. I got like 4,000 comments, and actually there's kids are still commenting. Every time I post that picture of that t-shirt, kids will go back to that post and they'll add to it. And within those 4,000 comments of people telling me what they do to unfuck the world, there was, topics around, mental health and the environment, supporting their communities, social issues. It was just a really kind of broad and wide array of issues and topics that young people really care about. And so I basically took away from that is that, they want to be a part of the change. They want to be a part of designing a new world that doesn't currently exist. And I think that was kind of one of the biggest takeaways. I think just kind of this kind of like participation in community and culture, this kind of like community driven kind of like rally. We look at like cancel culture or, this challenge culture. Everyone wants
to you know what? I'm completely like ad hoc here. Like I'm like starting the process of really thinking through cancel culture because I have enormous concern that it's going to have the opposite effect of what people are trying to do when they're trying to bring good to the world. Do you have any thoughts on cancel culture from your perspective?
It's scary. It's really scary, and especially.
And by the way, can you define it in your words to everybody who's watching? Because I think a lot of people may not be following along because we have talk about diversity. We have a wide range of individuals in the 5,000 people that are watching.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, especially someone like me that's a public figure, it's kind of scary to kind of put yourself out there in these moments when a message could be twisted, your words could be twisted, and people can rally together. And I think without even thinking, they're kind of coming together to just, ruin your name, ruin your career, attaching negative energy, to your process or who you are, your life. And it's really scary. How can you cancel? Like that was never a concept until like social media came around. How can you cancel someone? But it's so frightening.
The question is, does that individual get canceled? Because they get canceled for 48 hours on Twitter, and then do they really? Does it lead to that individual? And we're not going to even go there, but you and I saw some people who really didn't deserve to get canceled in the last week or two get canceled.
But I think what you just mentioned, it lasts just for like 24, 48 hours. There's just so much else that's happening that I think people all of a sudden might forget about it. And in turn, it might, they always say like bad press is always good press. You know what I mean? I feel like eventually people kind of lighten the load of what they're kind of, people kind of light, it almost becomes like a joke. It almost becomes like, I can't believe we experienced that. Now it becomes a joke, and now you're like friends again. You know what I mean?
It is like with your best friends that you do Raz and have 4 or 5 bad days, and then you're back and you're better than ever.
Yeah, all of a sudden, all these people that we're, quote unquote, have been canceled. Now people, I see people being loved again, like people, I think it's also for someone like in my position is to just remember the people who really know who you are, that, I think that helps a lot of people get through this. It's just, remember your true friends, remember the group that you really have around you. Like they know who I am.
People that actually know you. Exactly.
People that actually know you. Because
I apologize for interrupting, but I want to get into this before we let you bounce. Creators, just it is so deep in your DNA. And I do believe it will be the conversation of the next 20, 30 years, in advertising land, as Wanda knows from the strategy side and Rob on the creative side. I am pushing for a making culture. Let's not have 45 meetings about putting the UN in front of unfuck the world. Fucking make it, and then let's see what happens. And the reason that worked for you was you've done a lot of things where you've just made, and it didn't fucking matter to anybody. And then you had this one that did, and you build and you get reps, and you build and you get reps, and that's how you get good at it. What do you think about the creator culture? Like, do you default into anybody in Gen Z kind of weirdly thinks of themselves as like, I'm gonna make some shit one way or another?
Do what?
Do you believe that that Gen Z as a whole, whether it's coding, whether it's drawing, whether it's making memes, do you think the default for Gen Z is I'm a maker, I'm a creator, which is very different than the prior generations? Or do you think just a bigger percentage of them do? And what are you just observing from this creator making culture?
Yeah, I think, I think this node I think DIY is taking on a whole new meaning. I think DIY is like the new streetwear. When streetwear has now gone to such high levels of the runways of Paris, like where does it kind of leave like these younger kind of like, I don't know, bedroom design?
Right, that becomes the establishment all of a sudden, what you grew up with what I grew up, now it's the establishment, all of a sudden something new is gonna form.
Exactly, and I think that newness is now the kid who's in his bedroom, who is kind of taking all of this, it's remixed, this kind of remix culture as well.
DJing.
Yeah, it's like remixing, taking a bit of this, taking a little bit of that, and making new versions of it. I think this handmade kind of aesthetic is kind of coming out of that as well, where you see a lot of like marks from scissors, or like hand-drawn graphics, or, exposed, seams. I think there's a lot of kind of like handmade and DIY culture going into this creativity, but also kind of the freedom to kind of explore. I think it's kind of like, going to a museum or going to an arcade, like you want to play all those games, or you want to go see it, all the exhibits. And then maybe if you go revisit, you might go to your favorite exhibit. You might go and play that favorite video game that you discovered on the first visit to the arcade. You go straight to like Street Fighter versus the racing game because you realize that you just love Street Fighter so much. So I think, within this space, it's about experimenting, but then getting those ideas out of your head and making them, sharing them, and then going, to that next step. But, I think this DIY culture and kind of, not wanting to identify or put yourself into a box. I want to try producing music, and now I want to, fucking sing, and I want to, DJ, and I want to go start my own t-shirt line, and I want to put my clothes on the runways of Paris as well. And
it's yes culture. The answer is yes to everything.
The answer is yes to everything. Let me see how it goes.
By the way, I resonate with that so deep. I think it's embedded deeply in entrepreneurship and opportunity. I think the internet's done that. I mean, I could do this for 2 hours. Wanda, please jump in and add some incredible grace and knowledge to this, because I'm about to get hyped and just start yelling and shit.
But I think it's also this idea of playfulness and having fun with your friends. And I think there's this kind of satisfying kind of element that comes out of that, where it's just a vibe, right? It's an energy, and it's kind of within this box of just like culture, right? This kind of driving the conversations. Within that, art, music, fashion, parties, nightlife, content, music, like all of that kind of becomes the total package. And I think every kind of young person is now embracing all of those different kind of lanes. It's not just one lane anymore.
I love that. Wanda?
Yeah, there's so much about, who you are, Heron, that I think really speaks to, the attributes that we see in Gen Z, your ability to wear many hats, your ability to reinvent and take something that's original and recreate it. Those are all of the things that we see Gen Z wanting to do. So it's great. And I think it's so inspiring for those Gen Zers that are tuning into us. The one question I wanted to ask before you go is around, a lot of your efforts around sustainability and climate change, which is a real big passion for Gen Z. And one of the things that we found in the study is that despite COVID, despite Black Lives Matters and everything that's going on, it's not like they've set aside this passion. They've just embraced it even more. So so it's not going away, and there's a lot of brands that kind of jump off of, the hot topic and move on to the next thing, so just your plans around sustainability and how you're using your brand to support and inspire this generation. If you can just, leave us with some inspiring words there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about, I think, again, experimenting and trying out new technologies that exist at my fingertips, not ignoring the information that's in my face. I feel almost guilty ignoring, all of what's happening in the world. I feel responsibility to be a part of these solutions. And so, 2 examples, one, looking at, my fixtures in my retail stores, beyond just the clothes, a lot of conversations around the materials and the source of materials, but, I make hangers, I make racks, I have all this other materials in my stores. So I made this infinity hanger with a company out of London called Pentatonic, where we invented a new material made out of factory floor waste that we compressed over high pressure, and that became our infinity hanger, which is a circular kind of concept where this materials will never fall out of place. So if a hanger gets damaged or something, we can just remake that into a new hanger. And then also looking at, plastic and packaging. Like Amazon just went crazy because of the pandemic. So imagine how much packages are being shipped around the world with plastic. And looking at fashion, I worked with Hewlett-Packard HP Inc. to experiment with an alternative to plastic, which is made from like wood pulp cellulose, and looking at a pilot program to introduce and replace all of the packaging that I use for shipping my fashion, like the poly bags around the world. So it's kind of like these step-by-step, kind of almost these baby steps. I'm always trying to identify a win every season and nail it, share it. I got that in my bag. All right, now what's the next technology, or who's the next company, supplier that I can work with? I'm looking at, so it's kind of always been, and so how.
And by the way, you're bringing them more than they're bringing you, which is amazing. Right? I mean, that's what 1 + 1 = 11. When you drop that HP, I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, 2 people are winning. To me, literally the most interesting thing in business is 1 + 1 = 11. There's relationships.
I know you guys have to go, and I think that's the one.
No, go ahead.
It's bridging these different worlds together. It's like waste management and fashion. That was my Department of Sanitation collaboration. Like, that was unheard of. A waste management agency and a fashion designer coming together. And I think what's special about that is the 2 worlds coming together. So when you see a lot of really amazing things that are happening in sustainability and technology, they're only speaking to themselves. So it's going to take someone like me to come in, kind of remix it and package it for my community, to show them that this is the shit that's happening in the world that's really cool, that's really sustainable, but no one's talking to them about it. At least in the messages or through the voice that they want to hear it, that they want to receive it. So I felt like I was that cool guy to take all of this stuff that's happening, that's helping to save the world, package it in a cool t-shirt and an experience and some content and a story. And then I think that's when the Gen Z is ready to receive the messages. So I'm really interested in kind of bridging different worlds together.
I love it, my man. We'll have more. We'll have some more chop sessions in the future, because what you're talking,
too short for all the good juiciness that's going.
Way too short. We'll do it again. Thank you so much for being on, Wanda.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heron. So next up, we have Paul Lays. He's the CEO and co-founder of 368, along with Casey Neistat. Their company sits at the intersection of gaming and creating. 368 brings professional gamers, internet creators, and cultural icons together to create new stories and opportunities. Company was founded in April 2019 and is a collaborative physical space where creators can come together and access resources and the things that they need to make magic happen. So welcome, Paul. It's great having you.
Thank you.
Paul,
I mean, Gary, you can just keep going with Heron, by the way. I mean,
Paul,
I feel like I just interrupted magic.
Paul, I don't know what's going on with COVID, but you're dramatically handsomer than ever. I think the long hair, I'm really wildly attracted to you. So that's something I should probably be transparent about. You look great, bro. The longer hair, the facial hair, dude, I'm telling you, man, this is your look, bro. This is your look. You look like a movie
I
star.
tweeted yesterday. I thought we were getting married today. So
I
thought
saw
it was
that.
time.
Actually. I saw that. Real quick, let's give out your Twitter handle so that people can comment on your looks, but more importantly, along with your thoughts and observations. What is it? And let's get right into it.
Yeah, Twitter handle is PWLeys, PWLEYS, and that's my Instagram as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Paul, why did you and Casey start 368? And what is 368 in your words so everybody can wrap their head around it?
Yeah, we started 368 because we just thought there was a different way for brands to work with creators. We thought there was an opportunity to help be an accelerator for creators without being exploitive or signing them into long-term contracts or anything like that. And it really just started with community building and connecting creators to each other and just sort of getting out of the way in most instances. And when we had opportunities with brands, just as producers, we brought those opportunities to creators, which is what we continue to do.
I love that. And so what was the most interesting thing about COVID, knowing that you're so fluid, so creative? Before we go into Gen Z and the gaming culture, which I think you understand so well, and just in general, the creator culture, just to jump into something I haven't touched on as much as I wanted to. So since it's 1:37 p.m. right now,
yeah,
fireside, I'll go right into that. How did you go into COVID, and what, if any, adjustments did you make? What observations came out of it? What's your biggest takeaway?
For us, I think we've always seen sort of like that difference between in the world of influencers and just like marketing communities is what created this like word influencers. And, creators are kind of have their own place inside of influencers, and they're the ones that can produce content and do things on their own. They have a point of view, they have a story to share. It's much more about that creative expression than it is popularity and like earning that media value of an audience. And so, I've just seen that people, I think, are inherently starting to recognize that. And it's like, creators are the ones that can make content right now. Production hasn't stopped in their world, so they just keep going. The smart ones are doubling down, and they're hitting even harder. And so I think that's just, that's becoming like more and more clear to sort of this business and marketing world that, oh yeah, so creators fit inside influencers, but they're not just influencers. They're little production houses, they're little media companies, they're entrepreneurs. They're much more than just an Instagram photo.
100%. What's you've interacted so much with Gen Z through this chapter of your career. What is your biggest observation of them?
Observationally, I mean, I think like you just like listen to Gen Z and where they're going. It's like streamers right now have kind of hit popular psyche. Yep. And they're special in the creative world because they don't just make their audience part of a community. The audience is interacting with them. And I think Gen Z is showing us that the future of content can evolve even further. And interacting with sort of the creator, interacting with the content, and live experiences is just sort of an expectation. They don't know any different. And also just like the way that they are, a Gen Z audience tunes into a creator channel. They don't really decipher the difference between the Food Network or FX and the Vlog Squad. It's just like, the Vlog Squad is curating the content I want to see. So just like FX is a big media company curating the channel. So they don't see the difference there. And I think
and they don't need to, right? They don't need to. At the end of the day, their itch is getting scratched.
Right.
Paul, so, your boombox in the background is completely going viral on on Twitter. Paul's Boombox is like literally trending #1 globally now. So what's that all about real quick? So I can just stop the Twitter, like it's taken over the Twitter feed. So I need to see other insights. Can you just address that so I can move on, please, with my life?
Yeah. There's a New York artist. His name's Lyle. He launched the Boombox project.
Yeah.
Must have been 8 years ago or so. There's a book, and there's boomboxes that you can buy. That's one of those.
I love it. What about social distribution? What have you noticed through the content and the creators and the streamers outside of their lane when they're living on Twitch, when they're producing a YouTube video? What are you seeing from acceleration from a TikTok or a Twitter or an Instagram, the infrastructure of social channels and how it's amplifying that creative? Has there been any observations or anything that's caught your mind recently or historically?
I think one of the things I'm learned more and more with live production is, building an audience inside of on Twitch or any sort of live platform. It's everything that you do that's not live is what's driving your live audience. So the most important thing you can do is figure out how are you extending that content, how are you making it relevant outside of the live stream, and that's the focus for, okay, how do I get that big giant Twitch audience that people are chasing right now? It's just highly valued. And then also the value in a community, and it's, we saw it in the, years ago with the Vine houses, and now there's TikTok houses. The Vlog Squad is an example of that. The YBN guys, they're in gaming hip hop. They're an example of that. And it's sort of having a relationship with people that share your point of view, that drive a bigger audience, because they're just driving to each other. And what a lot of the gaming, as like teams from like have transferred from being sort of these esports organizations into being like content production houses, what's been really smart is they've sort of organized that idea of community, because like now everybody from 100 Thieves, they wear that badge, they wear that 100
100%.
Thieves badge.
It's a real brand.
And that ecosystem drives, audience to each one of them as individuals.
Agreed. Wanda, thoughts for our main man?
Paul, a quick question in terms of one of the questions that we asked Gen Z was if they could only live with one social platform, what platform it would be. And the majority of Gen Z actually said YouTube, because it serves as, their biggest search engine, provides entertainment, and it's a place of learning. Does that surprise you at all? And do you think that that's going to change, as new platforms kind of come in?
Not at all. YouTube is everything. It's like, even I'm sure like we're all sort of at home taking on new projects. You're like, how do I fix that thing in the refrigerator? It's like, you just go to YouTube. So it's just the resource, not only for finding, useful information, it's where you go to learn about something. If you want to, learn to be a filmmaker and skip film school, just go to Adobe's Creative Cloud channel. It's all there. You learn everything. And
100%. I mean, it's literally YouTube is how I learned my whole life.
Right. It's like, as a marketing person, if you're not sure, like, what's the right perspective on it, just look it up on YouTube. You'll find like 75 videos about it. And Gary will be one of those. And
that's the plan.
Listening to people is where you learn everything. So
I agree. Well, Paul, thank you so much for being on, and keep doing the work you're doing, and keep growing that hair, bro. I'm big on that.
Okay, great.
You got it.
Thanks,
guys. Go ahead, Wanda.
The hair looks great. All right. So moving on to our next guest, one of our favorite people at VaynerMedia, John Sass. He is the VP of Advertising on Scott's Miracle Grow, and And we appreciate his passion as a marketer and his exceptional ability to analyze trends, identify opportunities, and experiment early to kind of help drive results. Welcome, John. It's great having you.
Hey guys, it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, Sass, everyone was just like, wait a minute, what is Scott's Miracle Grow doing here? So let's just get right, go ahead.
The lawn and garden, the grass seed company, what are they doing, right?
And so let's go right to it, which is we're always trying to bring different value. We have an enormous amount of Fortune 5,000 companies that can't make the connection to why they would be on something like TikTok that's emerging like crazy, that's obviously dominated Gen Z, but is now really starting to penetrate millennials at a scary rate and even getting into Gen X at a scary rate. You know, help the marketers or the lawyers or the accountants or the guy or gal selling concrete, third generation family. How did you think about that jumping into, and then more importantly, set it up, tell everybody the challenge and how well it did so they can understand the results, and then take me back to, you know, what the thinking was there.
Yeah, well, I think happy to talk about TikTok. I think like what we did was actually easy compared to what you did a couple of weeks ago, Gary, of being on there for 12 straight hours, but conversation for another time. Much kudos to you for doing that. But you know, I think for us at Scott's Miracle Grow. So for the audience out there, we are the lawn and garden category leaders. So we are, you know, when you look out that back window, when you look out the front door window and you see everything from the grass, the green, the mulch, the flowers, the beauty that surrounds us in our homes and just the beauty of outside, that's really where our brands operate and sort of where we play. That's our space. And you know, for many years, we have just been so associated with superior products, with having like really good products and advertising of that more of the traditional type, right? The 30-second commercials, product performance, that type of messaging. And we recognize that over the years, the lawn and outside has become so much more, right? It's not just about having that perfectly manicured dark green lawn with the nice mowed lines in it. We love a yard and we love a space outside that people use. And I know we'll get to COVID and what the lawn has meant in the last couple months to people, but we want people that actually spend time outside and get their feet in the grass and feel their toes in the blades of grass. And so as we start to kind of evolve where and how our brands show up, we want to be in places that encourage people to kind of go have fun, go play in the yard, be a kid all day long until the night comes. And that's what we wanted to do. So when you start to look at like where audiences skew younger, where people are engaging and showcasing themselves playing outside, you know, TikTok was sort of like a tremendously new platform for us that we've never even really considered until this year. And, you know, you then merge that with COVID and the world of like just being so cooped up inside and feeling like you can't get outside. We just wanted a place and an opportunity to tell people, go get outside in the yard. And, you know, our hashtag Do the Scots was formed. And it was a little video with people doing sprinkler dances in the backyard. And just
one more time. Give me that.
Exactly. Like the sprinkler
there
dance,
you go.
And
lawnmower.
People, the pull the mower start, and just spending time outside, you know, and we're seeing kids there pulling mom and dad, brothers, sisters, having fun in the lawn. And honestly, when it comes right down to it, that's what we want our brands to be about, just having fun and enjoying that time together outside. TikTok has blown up for us. I mean, we like 2.2 billion views, I think, of what we did in over a course of the better part of a 2-week window. Right around the start of the year. And so it's been fantastic for us.
Do you believe, like Wanda mentioned, the parenting of the parenting, do you believe when you see that kind of campaign, is it I mean, it's early for this thought about Gen Z, but do you have the hunch that winning with this group can influence the parent to go to Home Depot or Lowe's and pick up a bag of mulch or Scott's Miracle Grow?
I tell you what, Gary, first off, Wanda, all 4 of the key kind of takeaways that you guys had are spot on from my perspective, not as a marketer, but also as a dad of 2 Gen Zers myself. My kids are 12 and 9. I mean, our backyard has become our space, right? And then you take what has happened in the last 3 months of COVID, what the parenting of the parents. So think about like what your backyard, I alluded to it just a second ago, the backyard has become the conference room, the classroom, the dinner room, the outside movie theater, the soccer field, the dinner table. It has become everything. And I just know that not only as a dad, as a neighbor, as people who work with, but even what we see and what we are hearing online, the backyard is driven by, in a COVID type of world, of making the space a usable space. And now more than ever, parenting of the parents is such a true sort of like aspect of what we're seeing, right? We got to entertain kids. We got to keep them engaged in the backyard in that regard, in our space, and growing your own vegetables. We haven't even gotten to the other side of it. I mean, the grass is one part of it in the space, but now growing your own food and having that sort of educational opportunity as well has been fantastic. And I couldn't agree more with what you guys saw in your survey and your research.
Wanda, throwing you in here a little bit earlier just to mix it up. Thoughts, questions for Mr. Sass?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I wanted to kind of share and see, you know, if it's something that you think you guys can leverage, Sass, is, you know, Gen Z not only influencing the parents on new habits and adopting new platforms like TikTok, but our study also showed that the relationship during COVID has actually strengthened among parents and their children, which was actually surprising to some extent, because you would think if living under one roof, you know, quarantined and not being able to get out, but it's actually gotten stronger. And we've been seeing parents and children doing a lot more activities like cooking and baking, and to your point, you know, gardening together and getting outside together. Is this something that you think you'll continue to leverage? You know, is it something that you've also seen, like from your point of view? And do you think you'll continue targeting parents through Gen Z?
It really starts to dive into your other learning, which is sort of the dreaming with eyes open, right? From what you're seeing in a world with, especially in COVID, right? The stress, the anxiety of the uncertainty of a lot of different things, whether it's the job, it's going to the grocery store. I mean, remember there were a couple of weeks there where people were super apprehensive and not knowing what is coming next. And we have seen gardening fill a void unlike anything else that could have ever sort of happened for the category. And the projects have evolved, and Victory Garden has stemmed from that. But what has come from a little bit of that energy of having a food source and getting outside, we've seen gardening become projects for families and Gen Z and parents together that have been an exceptional sort of like takeaway for us. We've created a bunch of little outside projects, outside adventures, what we call it on Pinterest, a whole program of little bite-sized 15, 20-minute projects to get kids and parents out in the backyard, whether that's, you know, creating a little pollinator garden. Maybe that is growing a tomato and some carrots. Maybe that is having a little homemade tent that you can kind of hang out in the backyard and then watch movies, making some stepping stones and having some craft projects. But we have seen that gardening in and of itself has been such a great sort of lift. And to your point about continuing it, not only will we continue it, but in a world where people are dealing with a lot of anxiety and mental health starts to come into play, the impact of being around nature and live goods and just things that are growing and healthy, it does tremendous. It is, you know, nature's natural stress reliever. Just being around a garden and planting and live goods, it does the wonders for the psyche, for mental health. It is a huge opportunity that I think like we will continue to embrace in a significant way.
Victory Gardens, I know that was a pretty important thing for your company. Want to share that, more importantly, you know, because I want to bring as much value for everybody who's given us their time. What did you learn from that, and how do other big companies or mid-sized companies learn from that execution?
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, Tracy Ann had mentioned this earlier, listening to our Chase, person you had on here. I think the one thing that she said, and I completely agree, is, man, we were listening, right? As marketers, you got to listen to what is happening and what is being sort of typed and written and posted and shared. And what we saw very organically early on was, because of COVID, because of the uncertainty, because of grocery, like, we saw this kind of rallying cry that was very harkened back to the World War II, after kind of like the country was in a pandemic kind of mode, where people just got a sense of like taking a little bit of self-control and also controlling what they can control, which was, I can plant my own garden. I can have some food source in my backyard. And we started to see victory gardens sort of as a hashtag popping up in a variety of places. And frankly, we just leaned in a major way. And so we embraced it wholeheartedly. And gardening, and sort of edible gardening specifically, has taken off. And I think, again, just in a world where there's a lot of uncertainty of a lot of things happening, there's a couple things that just are very calming that you can control, and that's maybe right in your own backyard. And so from a Miracle Grow perspective on our other major brand, we saw people gardening like never before, at significant levels, that it took a big shift of maybe mindset change. But frankly, like, when you just come down to the basics of life, right? Just kind of growing your own food in your own backyard. Nothing's fresher than picking some tomatoes and lettuce right out of your own garden. And I think that's a fantastic place to be, and one that I think for our brands is just, it's been a real blessing here, and silver lining, I guess.
Two things. One, is that a beautiful snake plant behind you?
It is. You check that out. I got to keep it going a little bit better, though.
Yeah, I said, what just happened? Yeah, exactly. You moved your shoulder and we saw the dead piece kind of like this part.
Keep this side.
Yeah, there we go. Number two, your 9 and 12-year-old. What are, obviously one of the great things of this time is an interesting point on Wanda. I think some families got closer together. I think some families are breaking up in permanent nature. Knowing that you've had the luxury of having more time with them, because I know you're busy and you travel and things of that nature, what has been the most surprising behavior you observed from them in their consumption of media or engagement with content or marketing, things of that nature? What, obviously you know them, obviously you're there, but like, now that you're double clicking and you're really a little bit deeper, what kind of caught you off guard, if anything?
Yeah, I think and you guys were alluding it in some of your research as well. So my 12-year-old son is probably watching YouTube right now, by the way, Wanda. So like, YouTube in this house is absolutely the mainstay. But I think there's been a little bit of the, I forget where in your research you kind of alluded to it, but honing your own little craft. I think in a world where it's easy to kind of pop to this, to that, to the other, kind of how maybe we were pre-COVID. I think in a post-COVID world here, where things have slowed down a little bit and we've got a little bit more sense of like engagement in different areas, I think there are little wins that I see happening in very small things in and around our house. And I think maybe it's playing basketball in the driveway. Maybe it's, cooking and eating dinner together. Maybe it's creating a new little Minecraft world on some of our games. But I think I see my kids as a dad being a little bit more excited about some of the things that they're doing, and being okay with mom and dad. And we're kind of like, this is our family. The outside noise and all the other distractions in many ways have been isolated, and it's been nice to kind of get a little tighter and appreciate what we have right here around ourselves.
Love that. Well, listen, it was a real pleasure having you here, Sass. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all you guys' help.
Wanda?
Thank you, Sass. We are drawing to a close, but we have one very important and very special guest, Kathy Thornton Bias. She is the president and CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee. I think it's a beautiful segue, talking about nurturing nature to truly nurturing our next generation in some of our most underserved communities. Welcome, Kathy. It is an honor to have you here. I am a huge fan of the Boys and Girls Club, having grown up on the Lower East Side.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity as well.
Kathy, thank you so much for joining us. I couldn't wait to, sometimes, not, and we had an unbelievable lineup, but there is a little bit of best for last. You're so deep in, because of your position in this culture. A, thank you. B, what have you observed over these last very interesting times in the last 100 days, COVID, BLM, like what are your observations as we sit here today, State of the Union, fingers on the pulse? What are some thoughts on what Gen Z is feeling? What are you seeing?
Yeah. First of all, I would say that being in the COVID-19 crisis and then plunging headfirst into the systemic racial injustice in our country has been the 1-2 punch, right? Like, yeah, if it just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it gets worse. And so what happens for kids who are growing up in poor communities, marginalized communities, is that first, there's this notion, and I'm so glad you asked this question, Gary, there's a notion that safer at home means safer.
Right.
Right. So that's presumption number one. And so for a lot of the kids that we work with, safer at home is in fact not safer. Millions of kids every day go to school, and that's not just where they learn, it's where they eat. So when you talk about basic human needs of where do I find food, where do I find shelter, where do I find a loving adult who I can trust, for a lot of kids, that is school. And so when you take that away, you've essentially ripped the rug out from under their little feet. What we're seeing in our community, and of course, many of you have heard about Milwaukee, I'm sure if you have not been here, Milwaukee has been rated the most segregated city in the United States of America. Milwaukee is the city from which the very well-known book Eviction was based. So Milwaukee has this historical wave of issues regarding race, in my opinion, not much unlike the rest of the nation, but we are a concentrated city that is truly very segregated. And so that tinderbox was arguably ready to blow regardless, right? Add on top of it COVID-19, a time where the people that are dying of the disease in our community are African-American men over the age of 55. Hands down.
Yep.
Almost a death.
The data has been very clear.
So when you add that into the mix of a child's life, what you take is an already sort of unstable, undependable foundation, and you just jam it with cracks and more cracks and more cracks. And so whatever footing there had been prior is now, in many cases, completely gone. We've seen a dramatic increase in domestic violence in our community since COVID-19, a dramatic increase in suicide rates, a dramatic increase in requests for psychiatric medical transport. And what that means to me is that people are having actual physical reaction beyond the illness itself, but physical reaction to this. And guess who it hits the most? Kids.
The kids, of course, it all funnels down, right? And
exactly.
The mental anguish becomes physical, and away we go.
Exactly. And so it's not a question of, can we garden or can we go outside into our backyards? We don't have a backyard. We don't have a place to plant. We don't have access to Wi-Fi. 25% of families that attend Milwaukee public school system, which is $1 billion company here, don't have access to Wi-Fi. So these opportunities to do a lot of the things that you all have been talking about just don't exist for our kids. They didn't go home with the laptop when their school shut down. They went home.
Period.
Right.
And to your point, they went home from the place that for many of them, unfortunately, is their escapism.
Precisely. And whether that's school or groups like the Boys and Girls Clubs, we are that safety net for the community. We are the groups that stand in the gaps and hold kids and hug kids and give them the things that they may not be able to receive at home. And so again, when you take those things away, these are creature comforts for our kids. This is life and death for our kids. We had a man come in and murder the mother of his children and all of his children 4 blocks away from the Boys and Girls Club 2 weeks after we shut down.
Devastating.
Killed 5 people at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we were open, of course, because we're doing food distribution like a lot of people are doing to help fill in those gaps. But now you see, police helicopters circling the neighborhood
Sure.
and blocks away from our most historic Boys and Girls Club. And I'm thinking, oh my God, maybe if we had been open.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe if kids could have been there.
I've had a lot of, I'm always playing the game of like practicality and optimism.
Yes.
And a lot of people were struggling at first that I am friendly with or influence, and had a lot of conversations and tried to remind people, the reverse of that actually, which was, if COVID started a month earlier, Kobe Bryant would be alive and maybe alive for another 50 years. And, I always go into that. How many people's lives were saved by COVID because they were destined to get into a car accident on the highway in the middle of COVID? And obviously I'm sure that went through your mind, unfortunately, in the reverse.
Yeah. And in communities that are under-resourced and underserved, those statistical probabilities never roll in your favor.
No, it goes the
I
other
don't care
way.
how many times you roll the dice.
That's
it's
right.
not going to roll in your
It's
favor.
snake eyes.
You got it. You got it.
To pivot to a far less serious topic, but one that I think would bring value to the people that are watching as well. How did the organization pivot? Because I think, a lot of businesses, small businesses here are physical. Obviously the Boys and Girls Club is super physical by nature of the structure. What was A, how did you pivot? And B, what was your initial thinking about what pivot ideas did you have? And did the pivot work out better or worse than you thought it would when you dreamed it up in your head?
Yeah. So one of my team members has a great saying: never waste a good crisis.
Right.
She's been 12 years at the Red Cross. And not that we would ever wish something like this on a community, but it pushed us into digital in a way that, honestly, Gary, we were not prepared to move that quickly had it not happened. We got good at digital really fast, and we were mediocre at digital before. So we're the largest Boys and Girls Club agency in the entire country, believe it or not, here in Milwaukee. Right?
Is that right?
It is. We serve over 5,000 kids every day.
Jeez.
We have almost 1,100 staff in the summer because of our expanded hours. And so we thought about what are the basics that we have to cover first. Forget what is our day job, right? We've got to block and tackle. So food. We serve 1 million meals every year at the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee alone. And we're not a food pantry, right? We're not Hunger Task Force. We're not Feeding America, but we serve hot meals every single day at the clubs. And for a lot of kids, that's their dinner. So we went into triage mode on that issue. We've got to get food to our families. And so we started setting up food distribution centers at all of our sites, of course, using, good social distancing and practices. And we're up to, I think, 200,000 meals as of yesterday. Again, not our core business.
Wow.
But you get really crafty really quickly, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a learning from this whole thing. How nimble are you, right? How good are you?
I agree. I talked to a lot of leaders during this time, and a lot of people went into dwelling mode, and I reminded them, I'm like, nobody needs a peacetime general.
Nope.
That's just good timing. This is, you've been talking big, I had to do a little tough love for some of my friends. I was like, you've been talking big game about being an entrepreneur.
That's right.
You've had a decade of calm waters. It's time to show what you actually got. That's right. How strong is your stomach? 100%.
That's right.
100%.
That's right. And so beyond, the food distribution, the other thing for kids who are in under-supported school systems, under-capitalized school systems, is they don't have all the tools, both in the physical school and certainly not at home outside of the school. And so we went into triage mode on creating digital programming that, of course, was age appropriate for our kids who did have access to Wi-Fi to get into some good enriching programming. Our kids didn't go home with laptops and teachers ready to teach. This isn't Westchester County here, right? So our kids went home with whatever's in their backpack, and that was it. And the school system was using Xerox copies of lesson plans for kids to self-instruct. And we were like, hold on now, wait a minute. You think that Javon is gonna take home this lesson pack and sit down and do, no.
Zero.
0.0. And so we went into, again, going from being a mediocre agency at digital to being a really good agency at digital. And we've got probably 400 hours right now of constant programming that's up and has been up, mind you, 5 days after COVID.
Kathy, what about the counterpoint? Because I've been spending a lot of time with, organizations that are trying to provide internet. To your point, we talked about two issues already here, right? Using Javon as an example, I couldn't, obviously you might have a little context of me, like the digital thing matters a whole lot, but I'll say it the only way that I can say it. There is no logic whatsoever that the greatest country in the world, the richest country in the world, is not in a situation where people have accessible internet at home in every single corner. And so the packets, ironically, to your point, no shot, ironically and devastatingly, for a lot of people that don't have internet or laptop or phone, packet was the only way to go, right? So it was a really interesting kind of mix because I was seeing it on both fronts.
Yeah. And Gary, to your point, how is it possible that we don't have access to free Wi-Fi in every community across this nation, whether it's an urban environment, whether it's a rural environment, whether we're talking about the tribal nations? How is that possible?
It's because we've not understood that the third industrial revolution needs to start. That, I'm very thrilled to talk about roads and bridges. I am, we need them. But if we're talking about Javon's next 100 years of his life, internet at scale, that is, we have companies that charge more for you have to, if you don't want the cable and you just want the internet, they charge you more because they want to suck in the cable prices.
That's right.
We live in a very fascinating world. And the reality is, back to a very interesting point made earlier in this program about Gen Z's interesting relationship with corporate, which is, it's got some cynicism, but it also believes that there's something there. It's funny, when we were just talking, I'm like, when is Google going to get done with these balloons, these satellites in space that just cover the US? Like, I've always thought the biggest business to be built, which was also, and I'm a very big fan of, like, you can do entrepreneurship and you can do it in a good way. You can win twice. The biggest company in the world is the one that puts satellites into the universe, does free internet everywhere, and the only thing they get in return is when you sign on, they control the first screen, say welcome, and whatever promotion or marketing they want to, and they'll build the biggest company in town. That would be awfully nice.
Gary V for president.
Hey, listen, I promise you, if I was born here, I'd be marketing like hell right now. What about for you, Kathy? Final couple minutes, and then I want Wanda to sneak in. Just real quick, biggest thing that you started using in a different way, technology-wise or consumption-wise? New podcasts? Did you get into a little bit of Netflix binging at night just to escape a little bit? Are you using a new app? Anything hit your radar?
I think one of your panelists mentioned TikTok.
Yes.
So I'm a mom. I have three African-American young men who are 25, 28, and 30. So the TikTok thing sort of missed me. But I'm also an aunt of a very precocious 13-year-old niece, Catherine.
Yes.
And she has had me do things. I don't know if you follow Megan Thee Stallion on Instagram.
Of course.
It is not for the underage group.
It's ratchet.
It's ratchet. Classy, bougie, the whole thing.
I know where you're going.
I've been doing some things on TikTok that I would not want the world to see.
Good for you.
What I have.
You got to do it for little Catherine. Wanda, jump in.
That was great. My last question, Kathy, would be around, we talked a lot about Gen Z's optimism. And one of the things that we saw in the survey is that Black Gen Z are 14% more likely to feel optimistic. And I know we were talking about the realities of some of the kids that, that the Boys and Girls Club serves. Just wondering, how can we help preserve their sense of optimism and resilience, in light of everything that's going on?
Wanda, I apologize for interrupting with context, because I know you were in survey and obviously the climate changed probably about with 8%, like if I'm remembering, with 10% left, the racial injustice probably piped up. So I imagine even if we came back at it right now, those numbers may have changed given the context. I just wanted to ground the timing of when you saw that 14%.
Yeah, but
I think it's important.
The interesting thing about it, Gary, is that we actually were in field, right in the middle of the protest. And, some of the video selfies that we got back from some of our, the Black kids that we interviewed, they were so powerful because the way that they phrased their optimism is that for them, the protests, as harsh as they were a signal that, that people cared because people were showing up and that change was imminent, so there's a real feeling for that. So it's just a question, because I think, what you do, Kathy, is all about uplifting our kids, and keeping them focused and helping direct them and giving them a better course. How do we keep that resilience in them, and how do we keep them, optimistic?
Again, I would say that the way they look at the world and the way they act in the world requires old people to get out of their way.
Yeah.
Get out of the way.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear about what the 54-year-old mama wants. Like, sit down and let me show you how to do this. Now you can help us with your talents, with your treasure and your time, but your thoughts, keep it. Because you haven't done a good job thus far. Because if you did, we wouldn't be in the situation right now. You've had to 16, 19 to figure this out. Let us take the wheel.
Yeah.
And I hear that loud and clear. And I respect that, because you know what? We haven't done a good job.
It's practical.
It's a fact. It's a flat fact. So get out of the way, old people. Number two is...
Kathy, can I interrupt? I apologize, because this fires me up. So I have this conversation a ton.
Me too.
I have this conversation a ton, and I'm literally recalling something I did in a little group Zoom the other day with some youngsters. And literally, then I looked at them and said, then fucking vote. Get out of the way, old people, right? Like, get out of the way, old people, then fucking vote. Because the youth, my generation, your generation, this generation, they don't vote.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a whole generation of keyboard warriors who are great at tweeting their thoughts, but they act on it zero. And we're getting older. Look at the two candidates for president of the United States. They're a fucking 1,000. We're getting older.
Okay.
And so, like, for every youngster that's listening right now, like, don't give me some bullshit that your vote doesn't matter. I'll punch you in the fucking throat. Go fucking register and vote. Sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
Okay. So maybe you can't be president, Brother Gary, with the F-bombs dropping. But, listen.
By the way, based on the way things are going, that would be minor fucking leagues if I was Kirsten. Go ahead.
I sense and hear I share your frustration.
Yes, but I want it for them.
Let me play the other side of this card.
Please.
They have not seen in the generations in which they've lived, because for my kids, myself or for them, voting matter at all. They've seen elections be hijacked in their faces. They've seen due process be unprocessed.
They've also, I also promise you, Kathy, with all the love in the world, because you're my fave, like, your great-grandparents would come down and punch your three boys in the face. They said that because they saw a Black president get, like there's also that. It's like
my great-grandparents, who I had the pleasure of growing up with most of my adult life, until I was in my late 20s, they also had never seen a computer or a cell phone.
For sure.
Right? So would be them. I would be like, Grandmama, get on this phone. She's like, baby, I'm not going to do it.
It was scary.
That's the devil's tool. She's not going to do it. So, like, let's put some perspective when we're calling on the ancestors, right?
Yes,
my point is, voting isn't wrong, but it's not the only answer. These kids have power over brands. They will burn your brand to the ground.
But you know what? I don't know if you heard. I don't know if you heard it earlier, and this is back to the love I was giving those kids, like, go vote. They will burn your brand on the ground on Twitter for 48 hours. And then, because I do this work, and then you come back 6 months later and the brand is not declined. All the brands that Trump bans are going to cancel, all the brands that on the other side are going to cancel, they're not canceling them. I like, if Chick-fil-A is not going out of business.
Well, first of all, it's a damn good sandwich, so it's not.
Well, listen,
You're right.
so, but you know, these are real Listen, I'm with you the most, but then you look at and this is the point right now, and this is why I'm excited, because I want to help them with all my soul. We're in a great place, to your point. They're thinking at a level that we have not seen before.
Yes.
We just
and they're engaging in discourse
yes.
at a high enough level to understand the facts and understand the stakes. And I would say heretofore, those two things were not linked.
I think that's right.
What you're saying, I think we're coming to some mutual agreement in that it's not in the absence of voting, but it's also in the presence of something additional. So we are leading an effort, number one, to open all of our clubs to be voter registration polls this November. We are lobbying using all of the resources of our great board members and all their influence to be like, okay, we've got 6 inner city clubs. We open them. I will pay my staff to be able to volunteer there and take a day off from work because we want brown people to vote. And we will take all of our fleet of vans and shuttle these kids who are around town to have their first time, quote unquote, with us, vote. So it's not an absence of voting.
And by the way, you'll appreciate it.
Extra piece.
We have unbelievable aligned views on this. To your point, I'm with you on that. If they want to cancel brands because they don't support them the right way, which is very powerful, I'm like, let's go, but just do it, because people, razz it and then 48 hours later buy it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an endurance issue. I would say,
honestly,
little bit of an endurance issue.
By the way, we run out of time, and I'm watching people who got meetings at 2:15, at least Eastern, tweeting about this. But Kathy, we're going to get back channel and get connected. I want to do some stuff. Next time I'm in the area, I would love to come and give a talk pro bono to the Boys and Girls Club in Milwaukee. I would love to do that. And I'd love to get to know you better, because I'm loving this conversation. So I really appreciate you being here. Really.
Likewise. God bless. Andrea, I love you, sister.
That was so powerful. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Wanda, for just a remarkable. I want to continue this conversation the rest of today. The good news is we're going to continue it next week, though. So thank you, Wanda. Thank you, Gary. If anyone's interested in receiving the summary from the Gen Z survey that we just spent the last couple of hours talking about, please feel free to email us, marketingforthenow@vaynerx.com. We'll also be posting the recording from today's episode and all the rest of them on VaynerX.com, so check that out. Next week, we've got a really potent session just to continue all the leadership conversations and some of the real stuff. We'll be talking about leading courageously for the now. We've got quite the lineup on Thursday, June 25th from 12:30 to 2:30. It includes the CEO of Ben & Jerry's, Shark Tank's Damon John, Dr. Jennifer Eberhard, who's a Stanford professor, and she's an author and an authority on bias. And we've got a bunch of other brands and thought leaders and activists, and we're really hoping that you'll join us. So please come back, keep the conversation going on Twitter, #marketingforthenow, and we'll see you next week.
I'm going to just thank you, Andrea. Great job again. Kathy, thank you again one more time. That was so fun. I'm getting text by a trillion people saying, we need the Kathy and Gary show for the rest of our lives. Wanda, thank you so much. I tend to not love co-hosts because I'm way too selfish when it comes to, framing the conversation, but you were remarkable. And thank you so much for the incredible study. And I want to dig deeper into that. And I want to remind everybody who was on today to definitely not miss next week's. I think it's going to be extremely valuable. Please make sure that you're signed up for all the emails, all the notifications. Hit up the VaynerMedia Twitter handle, or make sure you bookmark the URLs that are shared. We'll be Andrea, when will people be getting the details and for the exact time and promotion, and how can people that just stumbled on this through social media get signed up so they make sure they don't miss future ones?
We're going to be promoting this one starting this afternoon. So we got you on film now. Up next. So yeah, you'll see it on all our social handles starting this afternoon.
VaynerMedia social handles, LinkedIn, Twitter, all rest. Make sure you follow. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Stay healthy, everyone.